All right, example 2. So let's do it the way that I like to, where I'm going to create a rule, a transformation, and then maybe I can write down, I don't know, we'll see how much time I have here, write down what some transformations are. So let's start with x comma y, and let's do the x first. Now, x is just being times by -3. I don't have to factor anything out. You can see here, I'm minusing by 4. I'm going to have to factor it out because there's a 4 there. Here is a +2, so I'm going to have to do some factoring, but when it's just a number, I don't need to. So it says times by -3, so I'll just divide by -3. I'll do the opposite. And then the y, it says times by -1, so I'll just write -y, and then a +2. So I did exactly what it said. Times by -1, done. +2, done. And then do the opposite on the inside. Times by -3, divide by -3. And that's it. So I can take 6, put it in here. 6 divided by -3 is -2. -8 into here. -8 is +8. 8 plus 2 is 10. So I like that way a lot more. So if we were to write down what some transformations would be for this, I would say, well, take the x. Look, you're dividing it by 3. You're making it smaller. So I would say x is horizontal. So I would say there's a horizontal compression by 3, or by a factor of 3. And then we also have the negative, so that's going to be a horizontal flip. Whenever there's a negative, we can just do that. Now you could also write horizontal reflection. So that's these two. For the x's, the horizontal. For the y's is a vertical. So we have a vertical flip, or reflection. And then we're adding 2, so that's going to be going vertically up by 2. So I like to create a rule so I can come up with a point, and then I can write down in words after what all of our transformations are. Let's take a look at the next one. So I cannot have this like that. I cannot have the x with a number in front, so I'm going to take out a negative out of all of that. So divide this by -1 is just an x. -4 divided by the negative is a +4. Nice. So our rule is x comma y is going to go to, now it has a negative out there, so I'm going to make mine negative. So this is, again, this is a -1. You could almost write, if you want to, a -1. So our rule would be divide by -1, and +4 would be -4. So I do exactly the opposite. And then the y just says times by 1/2, so I'll go y times by 1/2. Now, I'm going to write this a little cleaner. X divided by -1 is just a -x minus the 4. And this is y times 1/2. So y times 1 is just y, and there's a 2 on the bottom, so which is y over 2. So I have this new rule here. It looks a little more complicated like that, but I like it a little more simplified. So I have my x point, which I forgot is 6. So put a 6 in here. -6 minus 4 is going to be a -10. And then I've got my point is -8. Put -8 into here. -8 divided by 2 is a -4. So this is my answer. Let's do 2 more to kind of see how this is all going. You could write down some transformations. Actually, yeah, let's maybe write down some transformations just at least for these two. So the x, that's going to be a horizontal. The negative will be a flip, so a horizontal flip. And it says -4 to the x, that's horizontal. That's a shift, and if you're moving in the negative direction, that's left. So you're going to go left by 4. And then the y is just cut in half. So it's a vertical is the y. And if it's cut in half, you're compressing. It's a compression. You're compressing. So your compression, it's a vertical compression by 2. Now, you also could write by a factor of 1/2 if you wanted to. But I just like, oh, it's y cutting in half. So you're compressing it by 2. So that's those two. If you need to write some of that down for A and B. But let's try C and D. So the rule, I don't need to factor anything out because you're not adding or subtracting anything. So the x is the inside. So it says times by a third. So I'm going to divide by a third. And then the y is times by -1 and -5. So negative y minus 5. You're making it negative, you're times by -1, and you're subtracting it by 5. Now this one, I don't like this, so I'm going to flip the fraction and bring it to the top. It'll become just a 3x, and then a negative y minus 5. So if I put my point into here, I have 6. 6 times 3 is 18, and then have my point of -8 into here, become a positive 8. 8 minus 5 is 3. 18 comma 3. And if you needed to write down, well, what's happening while I'm timesing my x by 3, so I would say that's horizontal, because it's the x. Is a horizontal, is it expanding it or is it compressing? And I'm expanding it. I'm timesing it by 3. I'm making it bigger. So it's a horizontal expansion by 3. Now for the vertical, I've got a negative y, so it's going to be a vertical flip around the x-axis, and then a -5 is going to go down 5. So those are the 3 things that are happening to this. And D is a nice one because it has a bunch of stuff in it. First thing I have to do is factor. So y equals negative, well, I don't know what happened here, so I'll just rewrite that. Negative f bracket a half plus 3. So I need to get this x alone, so I'm going to divide by a half and divide by a half. Half divided by a half is just an x. 2 divided by a half is actually 4. If you take 2 and you divide it by 0.5, you're going to get to 4. Or you can think of the half as being, flip the fraction to 2 over 1 and bring it to the top. So then you have a 2, and then this is a 2 over 1. 2 times 2 is 4. So this is it right here. So I can now do my rule to this. Now for the x, it says times by a half, so I'll do the opposite. I'll divide by a half. And it says plus 4, I'll do the opposite. I will minus 4. And then for the y, I'm timesing it by -1, so I'll write negative y. And I'm adding 3, so I'm adding 3. So I did exactly what it said. Times by -1, check. Add 3, check. Now do the opposite. Times by a half, divide by a half, plus 4, minus 4. Now I don't actually like the looks of that, so x divided by a half is the same thing as 2x, and there's the minus 4, and the negative y plus 3. So dividing by a half is the same thing as timesing by 2. So you could write down what all of these transformations are, but let's do the point first. So I have 6. 6 goes into here. 2 times 6 is 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. And then I've got negative 8 to here. Negative 8 is positive 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. And then what are all the transformations that are happening? So I'm timesing this by 2. That's horizontal. I'm doing all the x stuff first. So horizontal, I'm timesing it by 2 is an expansion. I'm making it bigger. So it's expansion by 2. And then I'm minusing 4. That's going to be going left by 4. And then for vertical, the y's, I have just a negative, so it's going to be a vertical flip. And I'm adding 3, so we're going to go up by 3. So that is that. If you need to pause it, sorry that it's kind of written somewhat messy. I don't think I have any of the stuff in red written down, so that's kind of why I wanted you to see that. But the rest is written down in the answer key. And so we can do the next question, which is just 4 more of these. And then we have one more thing to do before we get to graphs.